What's happening, everybody? We got tons of portal movement across the SEC. We're bringing our buddy Chris Marler to talk all about it with us. Locked on SEC, Locked on Gamecocks crossover edition starts right now.
You are Locked on SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what is happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked on SEC and Locked on Gamecocks. Great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to Everydayers for free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network covering your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the year with a big return over at FanDuel. New customers place a $5 bet. You can get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com today to get started. And welcome in our buddy Chris Marler. And Marler, it is, it has been an active couple of days. What do you make of just the first week of the transfer portal being open so far?
Yeah, some of the numbers, I love stats and numbers and stuff like that. So I think what's craziest to me was that in day one, there were, I believe it was like 1,580 or 1,560 players that were in the portal after day one. To put that in perspective, there was like 1,627 in the first year of the actual portal as like in its entirety. And that happened on day one. So what that tells me is one, a lot more kids getting active in it. Two, a lot more tampering going on. And that's just become a thing that we all know is happening, and there's just nothing else you can do about it. I think the other part of it too, that is like, I'm not going to sit here and think that, or say that like it's bad for the sport. It's whatever, because what you ultimately have here is it's just an extended like version of the recruiting process, which was for a long time people making over promising and under delivering at times to 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. Now they're doing that again, but they're doing it a year or two into their college career. There's a lot of situations where this is great for players, great for schools, great for turning around programs right away. But when you look at the total number of players that have entered the portal and you see 31% of them are in their third or fourth stop, and that 31%, they haven't graduated yet, that's a problem I think needs to be fixed. You also see that 25% of it's like 25 or 27% of the total players are going into the portal within their first year on campus and in college. That's also an issue, I think. But you're also seeing some of the people that know how to use it correctly, using it correctly, and some that are kind of falling by the wayside. Yeah,
and you mentioned guys being on their fifth, sixth school in some cases. Shout out to our buddy TJ Finley. We've had him on the show a couple of times, and I heard he was talking with Tulane today. And I mean, it's just, he's a guy who started in the SEC at LSU, then was at Auburn, and then went the smaller school route. And, we'll see where he ends up. But somebody did bring up a good point with TJ. It was like, well, look, he's probably not going to be a pro, most likely not going to be. So if he can go get 500,000, I don't know, maybe not that much, 50,000 from a school to go play football, why not maximize your potential right now? Because football's not going to pay you much down the road.
See, those kind of situations I think are so awesome to watch. And when you see like things like that, things like when you see kids that go from D2 to D1, FCS to FBS, I think those are great stories that are awesome for those kids. The ones that I don't like, and I hate to use this by name, but I will, like the TJ Finley thing I get, like he's going to get made fun of because he started at LSU, then he went to Auburn, then he went to, Texas State, and then Western Kentucky, and he's about to go to his fifth school. But like, you're right. Like, I think he knows the writing on the wall, which is, listen, I wasn't guaranteed to be a starter here next year. I need to make as much money here as possible. And I think he, some of these players also not only have families, but they have their own families with kids. But like, I look at a guy like, Bear, what's his name?
Alexander, yeah.
Bear Alexander, who was at Georgia and leaves right after they won a national championship. And within weeks, he's posting stuff on Instagram about, USC gave him an $800,000 apartment. And from there, he's now left USC. He's going somewhere else. I think you saw the picture that went viral of him flexing in the Penn State uniform, and he's got a Georgia G tattooed on his arm. But like, that's a kid that's been in 4 different high schools, then 3 different, colleges. That's the kind of stuff that I think it's great for them to maximize. It's always great for them to maximize the profits and how much money they can make. We live in a capitalist society. That's great. But like, and people are still paying for it, by the way. Like, he plays in a position where people are going to pay a premium for it. Right. The thing that I hate is when you see stuff like that, and like those are the stories that kind of overshadow some of the good stories that are also coming from it.
Well, let's get into a couple specifics, and we'll start with the one that has garnered the most wave of momentum here in the last week. LSU, they are sitting currently, as we record this, the 24/7 Sports #1 transfer portal class, and we heard Brian Kelly was going to do this, that they had raised some money in their Bayou Traditions Fund this year, and they were ready to go spend, and it's very interesting, the approach. This is the Ole Miss approach. This is quality players proven at other schools, as opposed to the recruiting thing, right? A&M did that in the class of 2022, where they went and bought a #1 recruiting class, but it turned out some of those kids are bust, some of those kids didn't pan out. I think you could argue, like, Ole Miss, their #1 portal class they signed last year, actually turned out pretty damn good. Walter Nolan was a stud. Princely Emmanuel was a stud. Trey Amos, like, the kids they got were good. Now, they lost 3 games and they missed the playoff. To me, I think that's more an indictment on they should have figured out the Quinshon Judkins thing, losing him. If they would have had a bell cow stud running back, and it's no disrespect to Henry Parrish, but, like, I think that's what hurt Ole Miss from being in the playoff right now. And honestly, I think if Quinshon stays at Ole Miss, I think they only lose 1 game, and I think Ole Miss is in the playoff right now. But that's beside the point. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing from LSU going and getting proven guys. And again, not just proven guys, but proven guys from the SEC. That's what Lane Kiffin did a year ago.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point all the way around. I don't agree with the Ole Miss thing at all.
Why?
But I think they did a great job in the portal. I think a lot of those guys hit. But I also think that the reason they lost those games is because, that's a lot of focus.
In the game against Kentucky, they couldn't sustain offensive drives. Dominant run game would have helped that. And then the game against Florida, same thing. Now,
there's no way that they didn't have guys that could run the ball. That was just something that
not as good as Quinshon.
Not as good as Quinshon, but that's also a thing they could not seem to get figured out. The Quinshon's also a case where it's like he wanted a certain amount and they were not going to pay for it, and then Ohio State was, and that's also fine. You're just not going to convince me that with the schedule they had, the teams they lost to, and the players they had on that team, that the running game was what cost them a game against 4-8 Kentucky, and then on the road against that's just my opinion. But I
you
also
agree the portal guys they signed. I mean, it was a great move.
Trey Amos, Trey Harris, all those, besides Juice Wells, it seemed like everybody hit. It seemed like everybody hit on that defense. And you also need to, I think it's a really interesting way that what he's doing is we're not super concerned about the guys we're going to get out of high school. We're going to go get guys that are proven out of college and at least from a production standpoint are kind of more worth the while. We'll circle back to that in a second because I think there's an example from today about an Alabama that is I think that's the biggest detriment that's going to hurt some of these teams and kind of even the playing field, but we'll get back to that. The LSU thing is fascinating because of this. LSU is sat here where they had all this money with Bryce Underwood. They had all this money that was set aside, and they knew, listen, you're getting a #1 overall player. This is what that's going to cost. It's going to cost upwards of $3 to $4 million, at least in the first year, probably over 3 years. You're talking about around $7 million. And that's fine. They figured that out. They had that allocated, and they had that all worked out with him. At the 11th hour, the guy from Oracle came in and bought a Christmas gift to his girlfriend and Dave Portnoy and all that kind of stuff, and they couldn't pay $12.5 million. What's so fascinating about LSU, and I've been saying this for a couple of weeks, is they had all that money set aside, right? They had all that money set aside. They also had money they were willing to offer guys like the Cade Phillips, the safety that was going to go to Texas. They offered him, I think it was 1.6. It was $800,000 per year. And then, Texas outbid him. The kid, Jakeem Stewart, they offered him 1.25. He ended up being this is a recruit for this year. He ends up getting offered $2 million at USC. So now what you have is the black eye that they had and the bruised ego that everybody was saying, oh man, LSU, Brian Kelly is screwed. And everyone's leaving and blah, blah, blah. And they can't land into these recruits. All that was doing was also freeing up a ton of money they can go get in this year's class to make a run next year. And I think that's what's been so fascinating because they haven't missed yet in the portal. They've gotten some guys that maybe might not be worth every bit of what they wanted at other schools, but that's the driving market or driving price in the current market for them. And they're more than happy to go pay for that production and going out to get Barion Brown, the kid from Virginia Tech, the defensive back from Virginia Tech. And there's another name that's coming here shortly from another SEC school that it should be out in the next day. They're working out the details, but they're going to go get another.
I know who it is. Another friend of our show we had on Locked on SEC.
That's just more guys that they are going to get dudes that are from the SEC that are proven in this conference, that can play in this conference. And I think it's just kind of fascinating to watch.
Which one not excites you, but like, should LSU fans be most excited about? I mean, the Van Buren one, I was raving about that kid all year at Mississippi State. I'm like, now he gets to go hang out for a year behind Garrett Nussmeier and be the heir apparent. Like, whatever Bryce Underwood's going to be at Michigan, good luck. But like, Michael Van Buren could be really good at LSU, sits for a year and learns. But Barion Brown to me is like, dude, just a stud at Kentucky. And like, now you have him and Xavier Thomas as returners at LSU. Yeah. Like, it's hard not to be, if you're an LSU fan, not to get excited about Barion Brown.
They still got some work to do on the offensive line because of everything that they're going to lose up front. And that's, that was a very good offensive line, especially in terms of, we saw at times when Garrett Nussmeier made mistakes, especially if he's under pressure. He didn't face a lot of pressure much this year. Like they gave up very few sacks. So that's something they still need to get figured out. I love the Van Buren thing. That is, I think you were the first person to bring that up, like how good of a season he was having. But like, I feel like it's an all-time fumbling from Levy for one. And then also to have a guy like that on your bench, it's just huge. It's just huge.
Yeah, and then Bauer Sharp, they get a tight end, they lose Mason Taylor. I mean, and then Jack Pyburn. I mean, just some of these kids that were, have done it at other SEC schools. It's going to be fascinating to see. And to your point, LSU sitting at number 1. They may still be at number 1 when this portal closes because they got more names coming. All right, when we return, got to get Marler's thoughts on the Auburn quarterback room. They've addressed it in the portal. Was it the right moves? We're going to discuss that coming up next. Well, first, I want to remind you guys, today's episode is presented to you by our friends over at the College Football Playoff. It is that time of year. The College Football Playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup. It's SMU battling Penn State at noon Eastern. And then, of course, the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate. And get this, guys, live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Yeah, if you're a Max subscriber, you can get all the playoff action there as well. Check it out, College Football Playoff. It is here, it is upon us, and it's happening this weekend. Also want to remind you, today's episode presented by our friends over at the Texas Bowl. And look, this New Year's Eve, 2:30 Central, it's the Baylor Bears versus the LSU Tigers, battling it out on the gridiron at NRG Stadium. It's the 2024 Kinder's Texas Bowl, and tickets are on sale right now. Look, if you live in the Louisiana area and you're an LSU fan, you got to be super amped up and excited to go see LSU right up the road in Houston. If you're, Texas A&M, Texas fan, whatever, you just live in the Houston area, why not take the kiddos, take the family to see what should be a fun matchup between Dave Aranda versus Brian Kelly. In addition, you don't want to miss the free Carbach kickoff concert presented by Kroger. You can treat yourself to a free country concert. Country star Tyler Farr will be performing Monday, December 30th. All you got to do is RSVP to that free concert at kinderstexasbowl.com. Again, head there right now for tickets, suites, group opportunities, and concert information. Seriously, right now, because tickets are flying fast. Don't miss it. Visit kinderstexasbowl.com right now. All right, as we jump back into it with our buddy Chris Marler, talking portal chatter. A little portal chatter never hurt anybody. And Marler, I want to get to Ole Miss. I want to get to a few other schools, but we got to start with Auburn, man. We heard Hugh Freeze and the Auburn faithful. I mean, our guy Zach Blackerby was straight up bragging. Oh, bro, we got a bag. We are loading up this quarterback room, about to have a major upgrade. They had Oklahoma quarterback Jackson Arnold and Stanford quarterback Ashton Daniels. Give me your thoughts on the Auburn quarterback room.
As well. But we'll get to South Carolina after this Auburn take, because I am up and down on this, because this is year 3 under Hugh Freeze, right? Like Auburn has 4 straight losing seasons. They have lost to Alabama 5 straight years. Let's make no mistake about it. Like, they replaced Brian Harsin, and one of the reasons he was gone is because he did not get the thing turned around quick enough. There's a stat, besides Brian Harsin, every coach at Auburn since Pat Dye has competed for or won a division title, national title, conference title, some level of title with a trophy attached to it by year 3 or gone undefeated. Like Terry Bowden was what do you call it? Like they went undefeated in year 1 in 93 under him. They were on probation, but that's the level of expectation and the quick turnaround that Auburn fans expect. I think that I wouldn't say they've been patient with Hugh. What he's done in the portal, they're really excited about it, but it's just kind of odd because I think the Deuce Knight signing was huge. Watching him and Walker White battle it out in spring would have been a lot more exciting for me than Hugh going into the portal and getting a guy like Jackson Arnold. And the thing that's so confusing to me is this: like Arnold is a guy with a ton of upside, just a ton of upside, right? Like a 5-star plus quarterback. Like I think he's already like the 3rd highest ranked quarterback recruit, or the highest ranked quarterback recruit that would ever come through Auburn out of high school. But we also saw him start for 9 games. Now, granted, he did it behind a terrible O-line, did it against receivers that were like, for the most part, like a mash unit. So if all the upside can still be there and it was just a victim of circumstance at Oklahoma, then fine. Like that's fine. I think what I'm more impressed with out of Hugh than anything is the left tackle they went and got from Virginia Tech that's allowed 2 sacks in like 2 years, I think total. And then the backup quarterback they got from Stanford, because it's not just you need to go get a guy in the portal for them. They needed to get some depth in the portal because right now they have a walk-on and Deuce Knight and then Arnold, and then like you still need a 4th guy, but you've lost everyone else. So for them to go out and get a guy that started this year at Stanford and tell him like, hey, you can compete, but you're most likely going to be the backup, I think that was more impressive than anything you did.
Yeah, and by the way, they did add a few more yesterday. Maryland corner Rayon Strader, the Xavier Chaplin kid, the O-lineman, yes, very, very good. But how about the running back from UConn, Darrell Robinson? I didn't realize how good he was. I started looking at the numbers and like, wait, UConn was actually really good at football this year, and he was a big reason why. So, again, look, to me, this all rides on Jackson Arnold. If he can live up to the hype, and look, he's going to have the best receivers he's had because all the OU guys were hurt. Auburn's wide receiver room is awesome with all that young talent. So there's no excuses now, but this is Hugh's career, or not his career, but his time in Auburn is hitching his wagon here to Jackson Arnold. If it doesn't work, Hugh Freeze going to be gone in a year. So
the other part too that's interesting is that like they didn't go out and get an upperclassman quarterback. Like they didn't go out and get a veteran, because Deuce Knight, by all means, like that's a 5-star that you expect to contribute in some way. Like, they again, like on his official announcement graphic, Cam Newton was on it, right? Like they expect obviously a lot of things out of that kid. So it just seems weird to me because I think Jackson Arnold will technically be draft eligible this year, but I don't think anyone expects him to be going in the draft. So we'll see. Yeah.
Let's touch on South Carolina real quick, because they got, I think, one of the more underrated moves. Jaylen Brown, the big 4-star from Mizzou, transfers to South Carolina. I had somebody shoot me a DM and said, why would he leave for South Carolina? I said, did you not watch what South Carolina did this year with Kyle Kennard, who we literally had on the show last week, the reigning SEC Defensive Player of the Year? And now Dylan Stewart coming back for his sophomore season next year. Like, that is going to be a wrecking crew. And I think Jaylen Brown is going to be in a great spot there at South Carolina to have a monster year.
I think they've only gotten 2 guys in the portal so far. I think they've lost around 13. Yeah, like 13. They got the one kid from Charlotte too, Nick Sharp, Wake Forest. They're currently targeting at least one kid from Charlotte, but the kid from Wake Forest, he's 6'2", 335. That's at least a body that can come in right away and compete on an offensive line that I'll remind you gave up, I believe it was either 85 or 90 sacks in the past 2 years combined. Everything looks to be on the up and up for this program, but there's a lot to replace. So I love the fact they get Jaylen Brown from Mizzou. That's a kid who comes in. You brought it up, like it's an edge rusher. It's a fit and a need that you have to have right away. Here's the thing that nobody seems to be talking about with South Carolina. One, this will be the most money I'm sure they will have to go after players this year. They're coming off the most momentum. I don't have those numbers in front of me, like to say that, like 100% factual. They have this amount of money to go after players in the portal or for NIL or whatever. I would imagine with how much excitement is around the program after the season they just had, and also the guys that are staying home, that is the case. But one thing that no one seems to talk about is the amount of players that Shane Beamer has hit on in the portal so far has been his success rate out of guys in the portal has been tremendous. Like Rocket Sanders, your best offensive player last year besides Sellers, that's a portal guy. right? Like Simon, who ended up being arguably the best tight end in the SEC. That was a portal guy. Like Kyle Kennard, who ends up being the Nagurski Award winner and the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. That's a guy you got in the portal from Georgia Tech. So there's a lot of Demetrius Knight. That's a kid from Charlotte, right? Like at linebacker, how great he was. There's still a lot of like positions they need to address, but that is a team that like they know their budget, and it's almost like some of those Tampa Bay Rays, or like the Moneyball situation we saw from like way back in the day in Major League Baseball. Like they know what their budget is, and they have done a fantastic job of allocating those funds to not just like good and big names, but like the right names that have developed.
Yeah, right. You're right. I mean, they're hit right on a lot of those transfers last year. The Robbie Ashford one, not so much, but he's back in the portal onto his next school. Hey, Auburn, maybe bring him back. He could be third string at Auburn. Give me a quick thought on Ole Miss. What do you make of them? I mean, again, they're killing it. They're a number 2 class right now behind LSU. Once again, killing it in the portal. But what do you make of all the Arkansas guys? Was there maybe some conversations had before that portal opened? Because that's a lot of Arkansas guys very quickly jumping over to Ole Miss.
Well, I think the Arkansas thing is surprising in general because, as of yesterday, we're recording this on Monday the 16th. As of yesterday, we had one full calendar week of the portal. They had 27 guys that were already in the portal. And they also had like 21 or 24 as of day one. So losing the guys they lost and losing them to Ole Miss is obviously it sucks like for Arkansas. I think the thing that is most surprising to me with Ole Miss is this, and our buddy, Stephen
Willis.
What?
Stephen Willis.
Yeah, Stephen Willis. I almost said Stephen Wilson. That's somebody I went to high school with. Stephen Willis brought this up, and it was like the shock from everyone else around outside of Oxford of like, oh, they're still going to be throwing money at people and still going to be like portal hunting. Like, yeah, I was surprised because it felt like, it was kind of an all-in or bust last year, and it fell short. I'm surprised that they still have like the means going into this season, and good for them. I think the thing that is most surprising to me also is it is clear that they are like their goal is to not sign a top 10 high school recruiting class. Their goal is to go out, sign a top 20 class, bring in talent, whoever stays, and then go out into the portal, figure out the best options and get like 5 to 8 guys that are key contributors. Trey Harris, Trey Amos, Walter Nolan, the kid from Florida. Those are all like very big key contributors. And going out now, you're hearing these rumors about like Jaylen Mbakwe, the kid from Bama, who's, a former 5-star that played, but also wants guaranteed playing time reportedly, and you got offered a 7-figure deal. I think that's the thing that's kind of icky about this whole thing, where there's tampering. 1,000% there's tampering. But hearing a guy say that he's been offered a 7-figure deal who's not in the portal yet, and then hours later he's in the portal and all but sure going there, that part is just I don't like that part.
All right, when we come back, I got a few more portal questions I'll hit you with, including what's going on in Alabama. A few people have posed that one, as well as Texas A&M getting one of the top wide receivers in the portal. We'll discuss that next with Chris Marler here on a Locked On crossover edition. Well, first, I want to remind you guys today's episode brought to you by friends over at FanDuel. And look, we've been telling you guys the whole NFL season, if you have not tackled FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook yet, you need to go check them out, because right now new customers can bet. If you've never bet on FanDuel before, bet $5, you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app going to give you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and college all in one place. Visit FanDuel.com right now. They've got all the college lines up there this weekend. We got Texas, Clemson. We got Ohio State, Tennessee. Whatever you want to get in on, they got it for you over there at FanDuel.com. Again, get started with that $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode also brought to you by friends over at Prize Picks. And look, Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more than or less than on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long at Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app, and make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You can now win, like we said, up to 100 or 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. They now offer MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. Go check them out. Prize Picks. You're going to love it. Prize Picks. It is the place to get in. More than or less than America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. All right, final segment with our buddy Chris Marler. And Marler, we're talking on the transfer portal, and did want to get this in. This is going to sound very mean-spirited, but I just want to pose this question to you. I think A&M's done a nice job so far. They got Jacob Zeno, the UAB quarterback, to back up Marcel Reed. They got Mike O'Reilly, the tight end for Auburn. They got Julian Humphrey, the DB from Georgia, that a lot of people think is plug and play. He'll step right in and be a starter. But the one that they got yesterday, Micah Hudson, the wide receiver from Texas Tech, one of the best wide receivers in the portal. Somebody texted me the other night and said, why would wide receivers go to Texas A&M? And I said, look, I'm not hating on A&M at all. And Mike Evans played there, but I mean, that's like a decade ago now, and he's been awesome in the NFL. Christian Kirk, he's had a nice NFL career. But think of the recent wide receivers they've had there. Evan Stewart, jump ship, goes over to Oregon. You had the kid Chris Marshall, that was the big 5-star, just never got it figured out right. It's an interesting argument. I mean, unless Marcel Reed we think is going to take a huge step forward as a passer, we know what a great runner he is. But I don't know. What say you on the Micah Hudson edition for A&M?
I mean, I get at this point why anybody would go to A&M because of the amount of money that they're going to be able to have in NIL. And that's not anything slanderous or negative about A&M. That is the name of the game now. It's like, again, moving forward, teams like A&M and Texas, especially those 10 teams, Ohio State, teams with like a national, following, and not, well, A&M doesn't have as much of a national following, but like very deep pockets and enough of a broad, alumni base to raise from, they're always going to be in contention, at least for like the recruiting of these kids. Like the Micah Hudson thing, you saw some of the stuff that came out on social media about his demands. I don't know how accurate those things are. I fully understand why you'd want to go to A&M. I tell you what, people make fun of A&M all the time about some of like the goofy things they do. Like I've poked fun of it as well. This year, especially with Elko like being like the head man instead of Jimbo, that was one of the coolest environments you got to see in all of college football. Like it almost felt like A&M went from being like this like joke, like butt of the joke type of program in the SEC. So when I would see their entrance like on a Saturday night on primetime TV, it almost felt like that whiteout death or whiteout Happy Valley type like feeling. So I get why anybody would want to play there. I don't think you're wrong about the receivers, but it can't be worse, right? Like from last season to this season upcoming in 2025, it can't be worse. They had 2 guys over 300 yards. I would assume that has to change.
Yeah, and there was so much talk about in the offseason, like who's going to be that guy to emerge as, that big-time leading receiver for A&M. And again, they had talent. It's just like it just never all came together. And, Noah Thomas was supposed to be that guy, and he got over 500. But, all right, Alabama, what do you make of I think it's 14 guys now that have left. I've not seen one portal addition for Alabama, but these are some big names. I mean, Jaylen Mbakwe, we did just see Jaheim Otis just officially announced he's going to Colorado, so he's going to go play for Dion. But Emmanuel Henderson, Devontae Smith, Justice Haynes, these are some big names for Alabama all in the portal. What do you make of this? Is just simply these are a lot of kids who said I'm going to play for Nick Saban and wanting to jump ship?
No, I think that like the Devontae Smith one was Devonta Smith was kind of surprising just because he was a pretty big factor on the defense. Like that was already a very, very thin unit in defensive backs. Like I said this going into the season, you lost 41 players in the portal. You lost 12 players in that secondary, whether it be to the portal or to the draft or graduation. So that's still very thin. It's an area they're going to have to address. And Devonta Smith, it's also surprising just the way he was in that Auburn game, right? Like he was one of like the biggest emotional leaders. It seemed like every time there was something chippy, he was involved. From what I was told, he also does have a situation with his family where being closer to home might be better for him and being paid a little bit more money to support like his family would be what's best for him, which is great. The Mbakwe thing is surprising. I think if the demands that I've heard were true about demanding playing time, I do have an issue with that. Like, demand all the money you want, but demanding playing time feels soft from an athletic standpoint, like from an athlete standpoint. Like you want to go in there and compete, you want to go play, and demanding playing time when really you only need one good year of tape to go to the NFL anyway. That just feels odd to me. Like if you want to go get paid $1 million, that's have at it, man. Trey Amos he was great when he went from Bama over to Ole Miss. It worked out great for him. The last thing I'll say on it too is the Mbakwe thing more than anything. Well, you brought up they haven't signed anybody. Not super surprising. Like the timeline they had even last year and the year before, 1 year when they're in the playoff, 1 year when they weren't. It wasn't exactly like they didn't start signing kids right off the bat. So I don't think it's anything to be super concerned about as of right now. The Mbakwe thing that worries me about places like Alabama, those are blue blood places that are trying to constantly have recruiting classes, DeBoer especially, right? Trying to have top 3, top 5 recruiting classes out of high school. How much money is being promised to those kids that are 5-star recruits out of high school? Because it wasn't like Mbakwe was there on the cheap. I'm sure he was getting a large 6-figure deal to sign with Alabama out of high school. If you're having to allocate that amount of money to a kid that's there for a year that doesn't impact you hardly at all, and then it's gone, that's a big portion of money for your NIL total. That's a lot of money that you were just losing, where you could have also allocated that to players that are already going to be there for longer, or to the portal and gotten more immediate impact guys. Like, I think that the talk about how the playing field's going to even so much now with the transfer portal and NIL and all kind of stuff, where I think it's going to even the most in the next several years is some of these places overpaying for kids out of high school. That's going to be dead money. It's going to be dead money.
Well, think of it this way. It's like if he goes to Ole Miss, it's like Bama, you paid him $800K to train him to play for Ole Miss. Like,
right.
That's where it feels weird. All right, I got 3 real quick hitters for you real quick. Ryan Williams, yes or no? Is he back with Bama next year?
I would think he'd be back.
Like, Bama fans aren't going to let him go. Like, whatever the price is, they're going to pay whatever it is to keep him in Alabama. Yeah. And Auburn fans, stop trying to create rumors on the internet that he's in the portal. Like, I don't know what that is. All right, who wins, Texas or Clemson?
I like Texas in that one. I tell you what, we don't talk enough about Cade Klubnik, man. Like, that's a kid who was 3rd in the country in passing touchdowns this year. I still think Texas is much better, and their defense is incredible. So I think they will be able to win that game. We also saw. I think if they can figure out ways to have Arch Manning involved too, that would be great. But I like Texas. I think if once they get healthy, especially, they could be dangerous in the playoff.
And Tennessee versus Ohio State, who you like?
I honestly, man, it's so difficult to go against a home game for Ohio State. But if there's a team and fan base full of big enough a-holes to not care about any of that and go up there and beat their chest and beat you into submission, it's Tennessee. Again, let's not forget that Ohio State is like 2-12 in their last 14 games against the SEC. But the thing about Tennessee that people refuse to acknowledge, that defense is one of the best defenses in the country, and it is not going to be easy sledding for Ohio State.
Yeah, temps in the 20s too. Going to be real cold up there in Columbus. We'll see how the Vols do. Marler, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for hopping on here and doing a little crossover edition. Hey, for your second listening, if you're listening to Locked On SEC, check out Marler with Locked On Gamecocks. If you're listening to Locked On Gamecocks, come on over to Locked On SEC and check us out. Talking all the latest in the transfer portal on a daily basis. I'm Chris Gordy. He's Chris Marler. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Come on back here and check us out right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.